What's up, everybody? This is the Hedge Mage back again with another Pauper video. Gonna be doing something a little bit different today, is what I've been doing a lot with doing a lot of theory crafting and sort of deep dive videos on new cards entering the format. Today, I'm taking a look at a new article I think I just saw it come out maybe over this last week, but it's kind of just a love letter to the Pauper format and a nice overview for people that maybe are interested in the format but kind of don't know where to start. Uh, so yeah, we're going to be taking a look at that today. As always, guys, if you'd like to support the channel, if you could leave a like on this video and hit that subscribe button, I would greatly appreciate it. And with that out of the way, let's take a look at what this article has to say. Right, so this article was written by Ben Guilfoyle. It came out on a Bolt the Bird MTG. I will for sure have a link in the description of this video if you'd like to check it out on your own. But yeah, let's take a look at it and see what Ben has to say about Pauper. So it's titled, "What is Pauper MTG? A Beginner's Guide to the People's Format." Very much agree with that title. It is, in my opinion, Pauper is the last bastion of good and fair Magic. It's incredibly fun. I really love it. So yeah, let's see what they got to say here. Pauper is my absolute favorite constructed format. Sweet, Ben. It's mine too. Today, I want to take a moment and share my enthusiasm for this incredible way to play the game we all love. We're talking about a format that is not only accessible but also powerful and incredibly diverse. Personally, I've been playing Pauper for about 5 years now, and it has been an amazing journey. If you've never played, though, you're probably wondering, what is Pauper MTG? And I think this is a really great point about just about why Pauper is such a great format is its accessibility and how diverse it is. There is just so many decks to play, and whether you're playing something that's tier 1 or tier 2, you are definitely going to have a great time. All of them have bad and really great matchups. Some tier 2 decks have really amazing matchups against tier 1 decks, but they have considerably a lot more worst matchups against some of the other tier 1 lists, so it's why they kind of stick around at tier 2 and don't have a whole lot of popularity. But yeah, it is a very diverse format. It's very accessible, especially when it comes to just the pure financial side of the game. So yeah, I think you really hit the nail on the head there. I'm excited to share some of my own experiences as well as those of the Pauper community as a whole. I would also like to express my heartfelt gratitude to the amazing Paper Pauper Magic Discord community. The monitors have been truly invaluable, offering their insights for this article and organizing outstanding monthly tournaments. So this is pretty cool that they are shining a light on that Discord. I have personally been playing on that Discord off and on for about a year. I've participated in some of their tournaments, and it is probably one of my favorite places to play the game outside of my LGS. I have been playing there more lately, but when I first really was getting into the format, this is where I was playing. I was, playing on their webcam tournament, playing matches with other users via webcam, as well as some of my friends, and it is a great place. Really great community over there. I really, really love that Discord server. It is a very good time. So, yeah, it's really cool that they are shouting them out right now. That's awesome. What is Pauper MTG? For those not in the know, let's quickly run over the MTG Pauper rules. Pauper decks are made up of 60 cards at least and a 15 card sideboard. You may only have 4 copies of a given card in your deck. Sounds pretty normal, right? The catch with Pauper is that all the cards in your deck must be a common rarity. And one thing I'd like to point out is uh I think it could be a little bit more clear here is that how cards enter the Pauper format is by having been printed at common at one point in time. So sometimes you see reprints and now they're uncommons. You can still use those uncommon printings in your decks. The printings don't have to be common. The card just has had to have been printed as a common at some point in its existence. But I mean that's kind of a little more specific, but I think what they're saying here is really good. It's just they're just giving kind of a quick overview on how the format is structured. All sets and expansions are legal. This includes cards from Alpha, Commander, pre-constructed decks, Modern Horizons, or whatever is currently in Standard. Commons are often the cheapest card in any set, so oftentimes an entire Pauper deck is only $50 to $100. That's right, the entire deck, an entire Tier 1 deck. And this is very, very, very accurate. I mean, I think I spent maybe $30 or $40 building White Weenie, which is a Tier 1 deck. Probably one of the better aggressive creature-based decks in the meta. And I think that was like $40. So you can build competitive decks for very cheap, especially compared to other formats where even in Pioneer now, you're probably looking at somewhere between 200 and 300 for a competitive list, and it's not even gonna that's on the low end. So it is definitely a fraction of the cost compared to other formats. In the time that I have been playing Pauper, I have probably built about 15 to 16 different Pauper decks, and each of them have been, I would say, my most expensive build so far has maybe been around $100, but that's because snuff outs exist and that they're kind of an expensive card. There are some expensive commons out there, but most of them are pretty cheap. You can usually pick them up anywhere between like a dime and 25 cents for each copy, so it really helps keeps the price down. And yeah, so this is very accurate. $50 to $100 for a competitive deck is pretty average. All right, Pauper MTG gameplay. The gameplay of Pauper Magic is reminiscent of Legacy in some regards. You get to play iconic old school cards. Lightning Bolt, Brainstorm, and Dark Ritual are familiar faces to any Pauper player. However, unlike Legacy, Pauper is missing the powerful threats that go along with it. This leads to slower games overall. The format leverages powerful spells to gain little edges over a longer game. Yeah, and that is definitely true. Lightning Bolt and Brainstorm are huge staples in the format, especially any decks that are either running red or blue. You see those spells quite a lot. You see a lot of these iconic old school cards, as they put it. You see those quite a bit. I don't know if I outside of Cycling Storm, I really haven't seen much Dark Ritual happening, so I wouldn't necessarily consider that a familiar face. I mean, there is also the Turbo Reanimator list that I have seen Dark Rituals being played, but I don't see a whole lot of fast mana in the format. It can be very grindy, like they said. There's a lot of mid range decks that uh, try and sort of do exactly what they said, leverage powerful spells and gain all these like sort of um, micro advantages over numerous turns to sort of come out on top. It is kind of why the format is so fun. It's just because of how interactive it can be. Where in other formats, there's lots of sort of situations in terms of the gameplay where it's just really hard to interact with what your opponent's doing, and they basically set up a situation to where there's like no way that you could win. Now the game is over and you weren't really able to interact or do much about it. So, and that is definitely one of the huge benefits that this format has to offer. Pauper games overall feel very fair. Decks can do broken things, but the end result is not as immediately game ending as other formats. This leads to Pauper having very unique threats when compared to other formats. Gurmag Angler, Muldrifter, and Mirror Enforcer may not sound like insane top end cards, but as you will see, Pauper plays on a different axis. Yeah, and this is kind of just kind of reiterating what I was sort of just responding to in the previous paragraph. But yeah, it's you do have your decks can do broken things. There are, shall we say, infinite combos in the format, but there's no like crazy two card combo that just ends the game immediately. At least not of right now. You usually need somewhere between three or four pieces to really make any sort of infinite combo go off. Obviously, there are storm decks, and they can do some pretty crazy things. But most of the real threats from some of the old storm cards have been banned from the format, so you don't really have to worry as much about that. But there still is storm is still very much an archetype in the format, as is combo. So you do see it, but it's not nearly as bad as it is in other formats. Yeah, exactly what he's saying. So it's right on the money here. All of this talk of fairy magic isn't without its exceptions. Pauper also has access to Cabal Ritual, Lotus Petal, and Manamorphose for those of you with a combo itch to scratch. Yep, definitely see Cabal Ritual and Cycling Storm. Manamorphose is in a number of different decks I've seen. Uh, but yeah, really helps you play a lot of spells over the course of a turn. It's But yeah, you definitely see those cards. Not though. I don't really see a ton of combo when I'm playing. Uh, but it's there, and you definitely have to respect it. And there are cards that for it. So, all right. MTG Pauper ban list. The Pauper ban list is only 33 cards. This is not going to be a full analysis of the entire list, but I hope these bans will hint at the philosophy of the format. Some cards have been on the list for years, while some are incredibly recent. Blue Monday. May 20th, 2019 is the best or worst day in Pauper's history, depending on who you ask. This day saw Gush, Gitaxian Probe, and Daze banned. These three cards are iconic free spells. Gush and Probe have been banned and restricted in Legacy and Vintage, while Daze continues to be a Legacy staple. This hopefully conveys the power of these cards. These bans were leveled at blue tempo strategies. Some felt banning all three cards was excessive, but Pauper Delver decks were powerful back then and still remain relevant to this day. Uh, so maybe there is the mono blue Delver list that is still out there. It's a good deck. I personally, my opinion is that the Demir uh version of the deck, sometimes it runs Delver, sometimes not. More often not, I have seen some lists that do. I think is a better tempo deck. They're still out there. There are definitely still free spells in the format, though things like Gush and Daze being gone and Gitaxian Probe, though some people may wish they were still there because they enjoyed playing those cards when they were legal. Those cards are just they're just really good, and it is probably the best that they are gone. But I mean, I was not playing in 2019, so I'm sure that was a pretty big shift in the meta game when that happened, and really was really shook the format up a lot because those cards are very good. Okay, Storm. Storm is a powerful archetype that has seen high level play in plenty of eternal formats. Pauper is no exception. Storm was deemed so powerful that practically every card with a titular mechanic has been banned. This includes Grapeshot, Galvanic Relay, and Chatterstorm. There are still some legal storm spells, however, they require strict build around or are relegated to the sideboard. I mean, this is true. I mean, one of the I think the only storm card that you generally see in the format right now is Weather the Storm, which there are some decks that can use it to gain infinite life or just gain enough life so that they don't die to burn or to aggro or anything like that. Sometimes you see them in the sideboard. There are some decks that mainboard them, Altertron, for example, or Turbo Fog, if you've ever come across that deck, does main board and are basically built around Weather the Storm. So Storm still does exist, but with most of these huge payoffs like Grape Shot or Chatterstorm being gone, a lot of Storm decks don't make infinite storm count or do anything crazy, but generally they use weather the storm now to not lose or make it so that your opponent cannot win. And there's a lot that they have to set up in order to do that usually, especially if they want to gain infinite life with weather the storm. Storm is still out there, though it's most likely not nearly as powerful as it used to be since these cards were banned. Affinity for power. Affinity has been a powerhouse in various incarnations. Atog was the poster child of Affinity for years. This smiley little guy allowed Affinity to morph between aggro and combo at a moment's notice. Atog can be a massive body on its own. A big threat is all well and good, but why are both going to combat? We have Fling. Atog is now a one-shot kill without even entering combat. This led to it being banned. Disciple of the Vault was one of Atog's best friends. It further lets you skip the combat step by simply sacrificing your entire board. Folks thought Affinity would be okay with Atog banned. To quote Gavin Verhey, when we banned Atog, people speculated it would kill Affinity. However, in reality, it wasn't even close to dead and took almost no time to recover. However, Affinity still proved too powerful. Disciple was banned only 2 months after Atog. And honestly, Affinity is still really good. I don't like the only way I think they could truly nerf Affinity if they wanted to downscale its power level is well doing similar things to what they did here in banning key cards that they use to win, or just I know not a lot of people would want to see the artifact lands from Mirrodin go away, like your Great Furnaces, your Ancient Dens, etc. But banning those would probably be the main way that you could really nerf Affinity if you thought it was getting too powerful. I personally don't think that is necessary, but Affinity is still very present. Like any iteration you have of it right now, whether you're playing Jeskai, Azorius, I've seen Esper, Grixis has been a mainstay for a while. Whatever version of Affinity you're running, it's honestly pretty good. Though the Grixis and the Azorius, either Esper or Jeskai, which they're all very similar lists. They kind of approach it much different than the Grixis list does, but they're still both very strong decks. Deck highlights. Pauper has a rich format. There are a lot of fun decks out there to try. I will not evaluate the meta as a whole, but this is just a look at some decks in the meta that the Paper Pauper Magic server and I would like to highlight. All these decks are in the meta, but I encourage you to check out a full breakdown for a complete look at the format. With that said, let's look at what this format has to offer. Affinity, Artifact Beatdown. Affinity has been around for in some form for a long time. When I began my Pauper journey, it was a Temur deck. It pivoted to Grixis for a while. As of this article, it has settled into Jeskai. This deck is close to my heart. Affinity leverages the affinity for artifacts keyword to cast multiple artifacts for little or no mana. Frogmite and Mirror Enforcer are the two big players here. Once your hand is almost empty, play a Thought Cast for 1 mana to reload. So I don't necessarily completely agree with what he has, with what I believe it's I can't remember the author's name right now, but I don't really agree with everything what they have to say here about Affinity. I do agree that it is really powerful and that Frogmite and Mirror Enforcer are very big players in it, and obviously Thoughtcast is an amazing spell. But saying that Affinity is now settled into Jeskai is a little bit of a reach. Maybe that is true if you play on MTGO, but if you play Paper, I think you are going to see a bit of a diversity of different affinity builds. You are going to see Grixis. You will see people playing Azorius. You will maybe even see some people playing Jeskai or even an Esperless. I've seen all on a regular basis myself. I think that when they bring up the Jeskai, there was a recent tournament win at one of the biggest Pauper events in the world. That is Paupergeddon, and the winning deck from that tournament is was Jeskai. So I think there is a big focus on that list right now, though. I personally, I have been seeing a lot of variation in either the all that glitters builds for Affinity or just the standard Grixis mid-range plan as well. Both decks are really good, so I don't necessarily agree that it has settled into Jeskai. That kind of implies that the other forms of Affinity are not really played anymore, which they very much still are and are all still very good decks. The mana base is the secret weapon behind Affinity. Pauper has access to a full suite of 1 and 2 color artifact lands. Your lands can help towards an affinity for artifacts. This very quickly leads to Frogmites and Enforcers costing 0 mana. If you never played with these cards, then please give it a try. Their power is unreal. And this is very true. I mean, that, like I said, if you really wanted to nerf Affinity, you would need to get rid of the artifact lands. Like, because yeah, you just drop a bunch of artifact lands, play a few permanent spells that also create additional artifacts, like say Blood Fountains or Thraben Inspectors, those type of cards, and all of a sudden you quickly can get up to 7 artifacts and just drop a Mirror Enforcer, around somewhere between turn 3 and turn 4, pretty easily. That being here, so you can just play a 7 drop for free. That's pretty good. So yeah, Infinity very much gets to power very quickly, so you really got to respect their game plan. The last piece of Infinity is All That Glitters. This little enchantment was uncommon, but was reprinted as common in Commander Masters. This gives Affinity a sort of combo angle. Instead of simply playing Frogmites for free, we now play Ginger Brute too. Attach all the glitters, make it unblockable. Suddenly, you're putting huge pressure on the opponent's life total. And yeah, all the glitters has really shaked up the affinity builds. You are seeing a huge variation on all the glitters. Basically, all you really have to do is have some creatures with evasion, like say your Ginger Brute, an Ornithopter, animating a artifact land with a Kenku Artificer, and when you animate them with the artificer, it has flying, so it has evasion that way as well. Throwing in all the glitters on them, all of a sudden you're swinging for a lot of damage. Usually it's like pretty easy to get to 10 plus damage with a single attacker, which is pretty insane and puts a lot of pressure on your opponent. And yeah, so there is a lot of there's a few different affinity builds that do feature all that glitters. They are very strong and does kind of give it a combo angle, but it's still very much just an aggressive aggro deck. Uh, but yeah, lots of fun to be had there if you are interested in those types of builds. All right. Boros Bounce, aggressive value. Boros Bounce is a pauper deck that leverages cantrips style enter the battlefield effects and aggressive flyers to put pressure on the opponent. This deck has been around in some form for a long time. Core Skyfisher and Glinthawk are key players. Bouncing your permanents might sound like a bad idea, but we have a host of valuable cards we love to play over and over again. So the current iteration of this right now is usually referred to as Boros Synth, using a card called Experimental Synthesizer, which you can get a lot of value out of that card by bouncing it, especially in the mid to late game. Really helps you not run out of cards to play. It can be absolutely insane, the amount of plays you can make in a single turn just by bouncing your a synthesizer a couple times. It is pretty wild. Over suite of value cards. Oh, sorry. Our suite of value cards includes Experimental Synthesizer, Thraben Inspector, and Ichor Wellspring for card advantage. Meanwhile, Barbed Batterfist gives us tokens. Dongbringer Cleric is a silver bullet in the main board. This deck is a well-oiled machine. Every turn you will be moving cards all around the board, amassing tokens, card advantage, and more. Yeah, this deck is very grindy. It is a very good deck in my opinion. Probably one of the better mid-range decks that you could play right now, and it is also very fun to pilot. The deck has a number of artifacts that this makes Galvanic Blast a better version of Lightning Bolt in many situations. This makes for a versatile removal spell or powerful burn spell. This lets the deck pivot between aggro and control depending on the situation. Now, you get to Metalcraft very easily with the deck. This is 100% true. Cycle Storm. Cycle into the eye of the storm. Cycle Storm is iconic. I certainly wouldn't call it tier 1, however, talented Storm pilots frequently put up solid results with this deck. It also has a reputation as the most expensive deck in the format, a whopping $175. The limited access to Storm spells makes this deck unique. The deck revolves around three key cards: Songs of the Dam, Reaping the Graves, and Drannith Stinger. And Drannith Stinger is basically your win con in the deck. Things like Songs of the Dam and Reaping the Graves allow you to basically have just these crazy turns where you just make a ton of mana and get back your cyclers from your hand, ping your opponents with Drannith Stinger by cycling them, and then just rinse and repeat with Reaping the Graves, that being one of the few storm cards that are left in the format. Songs of the Damned is one of many rituals in the deck. You can use songs to regularly generate 10 or more mana, thanks to all the creatures we cycle into the grave. Dark Ritual and Cabal Ritual help round out this fast mana package. Rituals let us cycle away our hand, helping us find Songs of the Damned or for even more mana. The deck also plays Lotus Petal. This is our mana fixing. Reaping the Graves features the titular storm mechanic. It allows us to return all those cycled creatures back to our hands. From here we can dig even deeper into our deck for our win conditions. It also lets us return key cards like Drannith Stinger back to our hand when we decide to go for the kill. Yeah, it is a pretty interesting deck. I mean, if you like Storm decks and you like that kind of play pattern, it's definitely a deck you want to check out. Piloting, does take some skill. So it's definitely a very skill-based deck. So if you're into that, it's definitely one you want to check out. It is, like you said, one of the more expensive decks. I almost said popular. Actually, I haven't seen this deck very much, so I wouldn't really consider it super popular. Which is a lot to do with probably its price. Uh, a lot of the things that attracts a lot of players to this format is the fact that you can build a deck for like $40 or $50, and it can be a strong deck. Um, there's really no way to cut corners around Cycling Storm, though. So, yeah, I think that's probably the main reason you don't see people play it. But as one player at my LGS puts it, it's like playing solitaire. So they don't actually bring it a lot, but sometimes they do just for fun and to keep us all on our toes. Okay, Drannith Stinger is our source of damage. In the early game, we can cycle it away to draw a card, but when it's time to go for the win, we cast it and start blasting. Stinger is not played for tempo. We do not play Stinger unless we intend to win on that turn. The card is too important. The remaining cards with cycling are unremarkable. They all cycle for 1 mana or less, and it is rare for them actually to hit the table. Cycle Storm is a deck that excites me. I love that this is something possible with only commons. Yeah, it is a crazy deck, that's for sure. All right, Koldatha Burn. Artifacts conduct lightning. Burn is an archetype as old as Magic itself. Pauper Burn is currently the top deck in the meta as of 2023. It saw the banning of Monastery Swiftspear. With that said, the deck is still relevant and powerful. Burn in Pauper leverages sacrifice and artifact synergy with traditional burn spells to put pressure on the opponent. Burn has seen versions that focus more on creatures or spells over its history. As of this article, the deck focuses on creatures, which to me is kind of an oxymoron a little bit when we're talking about burn, since I guess it's my opinion, I definitely view burn as a spell slinger uh type of archetype, and when you're using creatures I would generally say that that's more of an aggro deck. I personally consider Koldatha Red, so based off of Koldatha Rebirth, to be an aggro deck, since their plan is to play get a lot of creatures and a lot of power on the board early game, swing in for a bunch, and maybe then they finish you off with like a lightning bolt or a chain lightning or something. Don't really consider it a burn deck, me, because then you're kind of like, okay, does every deck with a lightning bolt, is that now a burn deck? I mean, Borosynth runs lightning bolt, but it's very much a mid-range deck and not really a burn deck. Certainly, Pinger Burn, which is another mono red deck, is for sure a burn deck. Madness is definitely a burn deck, and really, they they fit into that archetype a lot better than I would say Koldatha. A lot of people have been calling Koldatha red, Koldatha burn. I don't really see it as a burn deck, but more as a aggressive creature based deck. I mean, that is, it's a little bit of semantics there, and this is very much my opinion and how I sort of categorize these archetypes. But still, it is a very, very powerful deck, and yeah, very strong. We are currently in an era of Koldatha Burn, named after Koldatha Rebirth. For 1 mana and sacrificing an artifact, we get 3/1/1 goblins. To support this, we have Great Furnace, Experimental Synthesizer, and Implement of Combustion. The goal is to negate the cost of sacrificing an artifact. Synthesizer and Implement help us keep up the pressure. Other notable creatures are Goblin Tomb Raider and Goblin Blast Runner. We get powerful beaters that get better with our artifact shenanigans. Voldaren Epicure is the glue that keeps the deck together. The blood token is invaluable since it can smooth our draws or be fodder for rebirth. And yeah, these are like probably some of the main creatures in the deck: Goblin Tomb Raider, Goblin Blast Runner, Voltaren Epicure, and then you are playing Goblin Bushwhacker, kicked, and give them all +1/+0 in haste, swinging then for a bunch of damage. If they don't have any blockers, then they're either trading or wish they had. Um, Voltaren Epicure also gets another damage through, so it is a very valuable play for Koldatha. The traditional burn spells include Lightning Bolt and Chain Lightning. The high emphasis on artifacts also lets this deck play Galvanic Blast. 3 damage for 1 mana is hard to say no to. The deck can empty its hand quickly, and to help reload, the deck leverages Reckless Impulse, Ren's Resolve, and Experimental Synthesizer. This deck goes at a breakneck pace to keep the damage coming. So that's kind of weird. So as of right now, the vast majority of the Koldatha Red list that at least that I have been seeing and been exposed to by playing against them or by playing them myself generally are using just experimental synthesizer and implemented combustion. Reckless Impulse and Rem Resolve is something you see much more in Pinger Burn, which is using what's it, Reckless Fireweaver. Kessig Flamebreather. There we go. That's the card. Kessig Flamebreather is one of the main cards in that, which it deals a damage to your opponent every time you play a non-creature spell. So yeah, it's dealing damage every time you play Reckless Impulse, Rem's Resolve, and that deck is a bit more grindy than Koldatha, which Koldatha is a lot faster, tries to put a lot of pressure on your opponent. Whereas Pinger Burn, they can take kind of a longer, grindy route, but they are still, I would say, equally as powerful. However, they do not have the power on the board that Koldatha has. So if you're going up against another aggro deck, it can get a little hairy for you. I will say that because you don't really have much for blockers. Right. Oh, onto Demir Control Terrors from the Deep. Demir Control is the inevitable love child of the various blue and black control decks in the format. The merger occurred with the printing of Tolarian Terror. This was the key piece that led to Demir drowning the competition. Gurmag Angler and Tolarian Terror are the biggest threats in the format. Their cost reduction abilities let the decks pop off early with a costly threat, while the control plan lets the deck cast them without paying the cost reduction too. Yeah, and that's the thing. The whole how terror works is you're just playing usually by, I would say, somewhere between turn 3 and turn 5. You're just dropping 1 mana 5/5s after you've probably dealt with whatever threats they have on the board, as well as tempoing them with things like counterspell, or maybe I think some of them use bounce spells too. At least the mono blue terror version does. Definitely, I think the Demir one is better since you have access to other big threats. There is now the Cryptic Serpent that has been downshifted as well. That's another big threat for the self-milling decks that want to play Tolarian Terror. So yeah, they can put a lot of pressure early on and keep you from doing what you want to do. It can be really hard to do anything. Uh, Very good deck. To help feed the fishes, we have Mental Note, Thought Scour, and Fajali Archaeologist to fill the graveyard. A good mill with Mental Note could lead to Terror costing 3 mana less. Additionally, the deck plays 4 copies of Brainstorm. Using these mill effects, we help get rid of problematic cards from the top of our deck. And that's I think one of the beauties of the deck is that very rarely is do you have to deal with a bad brainstorm, where you're basically forced to having the cards that you actually don't want in your hand, but you have to put them on the top of your library anyways because of brainstorm. You can then just mill them into your graveyard with a mental note or thought scour, which is pretty awesome. So the deck is really consistent. It's really good at just filling up your graveyard with a ton of instant and sorcery, since the majority of the deck is just that. Uh, let's see what else I got to say here. The remaining cards are a mixture of flexible and efficient interaction. This deck has great potential to be customized depending on the meta. Decks will run 1 to 2 copies of Agony Warp, Spell Pierce, and Unexpected Fangs. Meanwhile, Counterspell and Snuff Out show up as full play sets. Yes, so the deck is very strong. I have been playing it myself. I really love it. It is a super fun deck, though it's really sad sometimes when your opponent, turn 1, drops a Nihil Spell Bomb or a Relic of Progenitus, or they have a Bajuka Bog at the perfect moment and can kind of take over the game for you. But that's also just one of the beauties of the format, is that it's just so interactive, and almost every deck has an answer to some of the decks in the meta. Obviously, there are going to be some bad matchups for each deck and some great matchups for each deck as well. But yeah, it's super fun. Really just love this format. Where to play Pauper MTG? If you are raring to play Pauper, there are a couple of places to check out. Firstly, the Paper Pauper Magic Discord offers monthly tournaments and casual games. Just put a message in the Discord, and I am sure someone will be down for a game. And this has been very true, especially recently. We've There's been a lot of new members coming into that Discord server. At least that I have noticed that the looking for game channel has been a lot more active than it was when I first joined. Which, depending on the time of day, it may or may not have been hard to find someone to play a game with you. That's definitely, I think, been getting a lot better on the server. There's a lot more active players. I think the format as itself has been seen a lot of increased popularity, especially with how stale a lot of other formats have been, especially things like standard or modern or maybe even pioneer for some people. Uh, so playing Pauper is definitely a huge breath of fresh air. At least it has been for myself. I'm sure the story is similar for other people. If online is more your speed, consider playing Magic Online. Lobbies and leagues are open all day, so you can grind tickets and trophies. The format is also super affordable on MTGO, making this another good option. I'm not super knowledgeable on the MTGO. If that's your thing, I say, go for it. I definitely would for sure recommend playing in paper if you can, or if you have access to a webcam or an LGS that hosts event. You just see so much more variety and diversity in terms of decks, that it's just a much more fun format. I've often heard a lot with MTGO leagues that you can see a lot of the same stuff. A lot of people net decking and just playing, this week's best new deck, or whoever just won a certain tournament, blah blah blah. So paper is definitely where it's at for me, but if online type of gaming is more your thing, yeah, definitely check out MTGO. That's cool. Finally, for those who love the feel of a convention or pro tour, there is Paupergeddon. This event is run by the Pauper community in Italy. They host 3 events a year. They rotate between Rome, Milan, and Pisa as their venue of choice. You can find them on Facebook. This is the Pauper Pilgrimage for mini players with hundreds of entrants and amazing prizes. This is a great place to fully immerse yourself in the format and even meet some of your favorite pro players. I have never been to Paupergeddon myself. Someday I would really love to. It's always a huge thing within the Pauper community, especially once we see what decks made top 8 and what won. And and like this year was absolutely crazy. No one really saw Jeskai Affinity coming. It wasn't hadn't really been an established thing until its Paupergeddon win, which just goes to show you that how friendly this format is to people who want to brew and who want to experiment and try out new things in their Pauper builds. There's a lot of versatility out there for this in this format, and it's just why it's so much fun, and it's why I love it so much, and kind of now wanted to dedicate my YouTube channel pretty much exclusively in terms of my magic content, uh to this format. So yeah, it's super fun. I really hope to make it to Popper get it someday. It would really certainly, as he's saying, be a huge pilgrimage for me. So yeah, that's cool. Okay, conclusions and the paper Popper Magic Discord. I want to express my heartfelt gratitude to the moderators at the Paper Popper Magic Discord. They have provided me with countless hours of enjoyment on the server and also given me valuable insights for this article. If any of what I've mentioned piques your interest, I highly recommend visiting them, asking questions, and enjoying some games. They even organize webcam tournaments every month with exciting prizes. In February, the tournament had an impressive turnout of 120 participants from 19 different countries. Pauper is without a doubt my absolute favorite Magic format. It offers a wide range of diversity, challenging gameplay, and an incredible supportive community. I encourage you to spread the word about this incredible format and give it a try for yourself. And I 100% agree there. The Popper Magic Discord is just a wonderful place. It's a really, really supportive community there. Tons of just like great feedback. If you're working on a brew and just want, someone to take a look at it and give you some advice, there's tons of people there that will not hesitate to talk to you about your build, no matter how janky or how competitive you want it to be. Brews of all sorts. I see it every day. Seeing new stuff, new ideas coming through coming through that server all the time. It's a really really fun place. It's a great place to like experience the Popper format in general, especially if you don't have an LGS to go to. You don't really want to spend time on like a digital client like MTGO. You'd rather play with real cards. All you need is a webcam, a good sort of lighting situation, and a Wizards account so you can use Spell Table. Though that's where I would say that's the main platform that a lot of the webcam games go on. Though sometimes people do just play in Discord chats as well. So there's always that option. So yeah, really great place to experience the game. I also highly recommend joining that server and getting into the format. It is a really, really cool place to hang out. If you do have an LGS too, definitely highly recommend going there. LGSs have not been doing very great with this economy, so if you can support an LGS, I would definitely encourage you to do so. But that's the article, guys. Overall, I think this is a great overview of the Pauper format in general. There are a few key points that I kind of felt like this could have been elaborated on a little bit, or some areas where I don't necessarily entirely agree with their points. But overall, I thought this was a really great article, a great overview of the format, like I said. But that's going to do it for me today, guys. I hope everyone is doing great, and I will see you all next time.